bit, we hope. So thank you very much for being here. Today, what we have on the agenda is an informational hearing only, just a briefing on Senate Bill 30 because of our two new members, bringing them up to speed. That bill is in conference committee, and so there'll be no action taken on the bill today. What we want just to bring them up to speed, and then I think we have a couple of proponents and opponents that we'll give them a little bit of time to state their issues that they want to talk about. So first of all, we would like staff to give us a overview, if you would. Thank you. Amelia.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Amelia Kovar-Donahue, and I'm an assistant revisor in the Office of Revisor of Statutes. And I'm here to give you a little bit of informational background about Senate Bill 30 that is currently in conference committee. Senate Bill number 30 is in conference with conferees appointed from the Senate Committee on Commerce and the House Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development. Last session, a conference committee recommended adoption of a conference committee report that struck the provisions or the content of Senate Bill number 30 and then included the provisions of Senate Bill 229 as amended by the Senate committee, which was an occupational housing bill or occupational licensing bill. In your folder today, there is a copy of that conference committee report. Up in the right-hand corner, you should see CCR 2025 SB 30 H2211. So you can refer to that as we go along today. And for those who may be listening or in the audience, that a copy of that conference committee report is available on the legislature's website. If you go to the page that for Senate Bill 30, you can find a copy of it there. So the conference committee report was adopted by the House Committee of the Whole last session on March 27th, 2025, but no action was taken by the Senate before the end of session. On January 12th of this year, the conference committee report was not adopted by the Senate Committee of the Whole, and new conferees were appointed. The House has appointed conferees as well. Senate Bill number 30 itself, in its original content, was heard by the Committee on Judiciary, and it related, and its subject was state and national criminal history record checks. The provisions of Senate Bill number 30, as amended by House Committee, were actually included in House Bill 2342 in its conference committee report. And House Bill 2342 became law upon publication in the Kansas Register last year on May 1st of 2025. So the original contents of 30 have already been passed and become law. Senate Bill number 30's conference committee report, which you have in your folder this afternoon from March of 2025, as I said before, struck the provisions of Senate Bill 30 and included the provisions of Senate Bill 229 as that was amended by this committee. There was the bill, you may recall, if you were on the committee last year, Senate Bill 229 was an occupational licensing bill. And there was one change that was made when the contents of Senate Bill 229 were placed into the conference committee report. There was one word change, which I will point out a little bit later when we go through the provisions. The bill would provide for occupational licensing annual reports by agencies to the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations, and require that adoption of new occupational licenses and material changes to existing occupational licenses by a state agency be approved by joint resolution of the legislature. So if you look at your if you look at the copy of the conference committee report that was not adopted, but so that we can discuss kind of the topic of the conference committee, you will see that section 1 provides definitions of agency, material change, occupational license, and welfare. Specifically, agency means any department, bureau, division, board, authority, agency, commission, or institution of the state. It does not include Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board, Board of Examiners in Optometry, Board of Nursing, the Kansas Dental Board, the State Board of Healing Arts, the State Board of Pharmacy, or the State Board of Technical Professions. The occupational license definition as well, it means a non-transferable and exclusive authorization in law in which the legislature or an agency, as authorized by the legislature, establishes the personal qualifications necessary to engage in and the rules and regulations that govern any occupation or profession. It does not include occupational licenses regulated by the boards that were referenced in agency above that were not included in the definition of agency. So section number 2 provides that each agency shall submit an annual report to the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations during the month of September each year. There is a list in section 2, subsection B, that the provision is that the report shall contain a list of each occupational license over which that agency has jurisdiction, and then they need to provide certain information regarding each type of license. Some of the examples there, it looks like there's 1 through 11, beginning with the number of current holders of that occupational license, a brief description of the typical employment of those license holders, list of regulations that govern the authorizing and implementing statutes for the regulations, whether the license is mandated or regulated by federal requirements, a description of required education, training, and testing, continuing education requirements, the total amount of fees that are paid to the agency to obtain and maintain that license, an identification of any requirement of good moral character to obtain or maintain the license, an identification of any restrictions in obtaining or holding the license, and a description of any reciprocity agreements for interstate occupational licensing recognition. And then in new section 3, there is the provision would require that any new occupational license or a material change to an existing occupational license adopted by an agency on or after July 1st of 2025 would need to be approved by the legislature by joint resolution before the requirement could take effect, unless such requirement had been ratified by the legislature by the enactment of a bill pursuant to KSA 77441. The bill also provides a process for Senate and House committees to review the proposed new occupational license or material change that includes a KLRD staff report, the Kansas Legislative Research Department staff report, before consideration of such a joint resolution. And if you look at the copy of the conference committee report, you can see on page 4, there is a list of the items that the report needs to include. I won't read those to you, but those are the requirements for the report. And just as a note for you, Senate Bill number 229 was heard in this committee on February 12th of last year. The bill was worked on February, hold on, let me get my dates right. I have my, I'll just give you a, make sure I have my dates. Sorry, it was worked on March 17th of 2025, and this committee adopted amendments. So the Senate Bill 229, as amended by Commerce Committee, went before the Committee of the Whole, and it was passed as amended on March 20th of 2025. It did go to the House, and it is currently in the Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development Committee. And I would be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I actually was out sick when we had this hearing last year, but I remember listening on WebEx. What was the rationale that this didn't violate the Stevens case for ratification of regulations?
I do not remember exactly the hearing from last year. I believe perhaps some conferees who are proponents of the bill might be able to expand on what their argument may be that it does not. Thank you.
Committee, are there any other questions? Yes, Senator Falscadeau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the occupational licensure part, so the fingerprinting, so is that just for individuals applying for jobs that would relate to security? Or just?
Mr. Chair, was fingerprinting in the original content of Senate Bill 30, I believe? Or is there, did I miss a fingerprinting requirement in
So,
29?
I'm sorry, then I'll, because this is new language. Is that correct?
Yes, the Senate Bill 30, as it was amended by the House committee, which related to background checks of employees, that language from Senate Bill 30 was actually placed in another House bill last session, and it was passed and became law in that House bill, and it was House Bill 2342. So the original contents of Senate Bill 30 have already became law via a House bill last year.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Do we have a fiscal note on this bill? Original one. Want to check. While they're looking at that, I forgot one other thing I was supposed to do, and that is request for bill introductions. Do we have any bill introductions today? I did not receive any information that we did, and seeing none, thank you very much. Okay, now we'll go back to a fiscal note. Yes, Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There is a fiscal note on the original bill, SB 229, and it was for the bill as introduced, although I don't think the changes that were made in committee would have material fiscal impacts. But it would require expenditures of $225,000 from SGF in the first year related to salaries and wages, and operating expenditures for the Secretary of State, and no fiscal effect on the legislature's budget.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other questions, committee? Okay, seeing none, we'll move first to our proponents, and time-wise, I'd like to keep our comments to 5 minutes or less, if you would. And the first proponent is Tanner Temple, Deputy State Director of Americans for Prosperity. Welcome, Tanner.
Thanks. I hope you guys aren't sick of seeing me yet, but good to be back, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Again, I'm Tanner Temple with Americans for Prosperity. I want to explain this bill in the simplest terms possible. There's a lot in it, but because it's at its core, it's a very simple, very common sense reform. Right now in Kansas, too many people have to get a government license just to work. And in many cases, these licenses aren't protecting public safety. They're just making it harder for people to earn a living. This bill fixes that by asking one basic question. Does this license really need to exist? Under this bill, every occupational license in Kansas has to prove it is truly necessary. If a license keeps people safe, protects health, or meets a clear public need, it stays. But if a license is just red tape or getting in the way, then it shouldn't be blocking someone from getting a job. The bill also sets up a regular checkup process every few years. Kansas will review each license to make sure it still makes sense. Nothing disappears overnight. Nothing is done abruptly. It's simply a routine review to make sure that rules are still the rules we need. I want to be clear, healthcare boards are not touched, so there is a provision in this bill for doctors, nurses, pharmacists, and other medical professionals. They remain fully regulated just because those roles genuinely impact public safety. And really, finally, the bill says state agencies can't quietly create new licensing requirements on their own. If the government is going to require a new license or make an existing license harder to get, that decision must go through the elected legislator. That means accountability, transparency, and respect for Kansas' right to work. So, again, in essence, this bill keeps people safe, cuts unnecessary red tape, and stops agencies from overreaching and helps more Kansas get back to work. I also want to point out, I did talk to some of the opponents prior to this hearing, and they made a fair point. They were talking about exemptions. It's AFP's position there should not be exemptions outside of health and safety. So in that regard, I did agree with them on that. But at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, protecting freedom, expanding opportunity, and making sure government serves the people and not the other way around. So, and I will stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. Our next conferee is Wendy Doyle. Wendy is President and CEO of United We, and she's on WebEx. Is Wendy there?
I am Chairman Alley. It's good to be with you and members of the committee. It's such an honor to join you today to discuss occupational licensing reform and why it matters. You may recall from previous sessions that United We is a think and do tank with our North Star focused on women's labor force participation, both workplace and entrepreneurship. And our quantitative and qualitative research tells us loud and clear that Kansas women cannot reach their economic potential when unnecessary regulations stand in their way. So CCR for SB 30 represents an opportunity for Kansas to join 14 other states that have a review process for occupational licensing requirements. By promoting transparency and informed decision-making, we aim to facilitate individuals' pursuit of their chosen professions without unnecessary government intervention, keeping the public welfare and safety in the forefront. We've done several research studies in Kansas, both quantitative and qualitative that I identify in my written testimony. But a key point is that Kansas has the largest male to female self-employment gap in the country, with 11.1% of men self-employed versus only 7.1% of women. We want to change that metric. Further, women are 6.5% more likely than men to hold certifications or license. And for this reason, we see that reducing regulation can help grow Kansas' economy by getting more women in the workforce as soon as possible. And we see the potential between 10 and 15% to grow Kansas' economy. So consider this a couple of examples that we've shared along the way that, for example, a Kansas salon owner that offers spray tanning services, they aren't required to have a state license as the spray tanning poses no public health risk. That regulatory balance allows entrepreneurs to expand their businesses and grow with no impact to public welfare. Another example that we cite is pet groomers as a further example. And these show the right balance between entrepreneurial opportunity and public welfare, which can drive Kansas State's economy. So after hearing this, in short, it creates a process for ensuring new requirements are necessary and efficient, and establishes a mechanism for the legislator to proactively gather information and data on occupational licensing requirements that will help inform future policy decisions. So this is visionary and forward thinking. And we believe firmly that the passage and enactment of this bill will make occupational licensing process more efficient for the future growth of Kansas. This has been brief, but I stand ready to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll have questions after we get through the proponents. Thank you very much. Our next proponent, Michael Murphy, with the Secretary of State's office. Murphy.
This is a common thing that we've been running into recently. We both have Michael Murray Jr. here, Michael Murray Sr. who's been around the building, and then Senator Michael Murphy, who I often get texts and calls from, luckily not constituents, but from interested parties all over. My name is Michael Murray. I'm with the Secretary of State's office. I am your Clay Barker, General Counsel at the Secretary of State's office today. Why is the Secretary of State being represented here? We were more part of the bill in the 2025 iteration where it plays a significant role with our office. We're no longer there. The reporting from agencies goes to JCAR at this point. But after Clay and Scott had been working with the parties involved for so long, he is supportive of the concept, so he wanted us to stay involved. I think the previous conferee did a great job talking about the merits and the potential pitfalls of occupational licensing. I want to focus on why legislative oversight is essential. Occupational licensing reflects a fundamental policy choice: who may work, under what conditions, and at what cost. These decisions should not be made solely by administrative discretion. I think we believe that the legislature is uniquely positioned to weigh public safety against economic liberty, to represent both consumers and workers, and make value judgments that administrative bodies are just not designed to make. Ensuring licensing is used only when there's a clear evidence-based risk, requirements are narrowly tailored to that risk, and less restrictive alternatives such as certification, registration, or bonding are considered. And more publicly accountable folks are able to ensure criteria not arbitrary and are periodically reevaluated. So Senate Bill 30, obviously different from the bill you looked at last year, a little more narrowly tailored. It's a first step towards establishing a framework for legislative oversight. Occupational licensing in Kansas consists of 3 components: simply defining occupational license broadly to include any instance in which state government requires a license to engage in a profession or perform a specialized skill. And then the reporting requirements. The reports will enable the policymakers to actually have something in front of them to get their heads around what's actually out there, how broad the scope is, and the impact, but metric-based reporting that currently does not exist. And then obviously the legislative review and approval itself. Millie did a great job explaining how that process would go in the future. To Senator Titus's question, I have a couple inquiries out just to further clarify the constitutional or the issue with Stephen case. My general understanding is the exceptions provided for health and safety are supposed to help on that front, but we'll get a more fleshed out response to you. Happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here. Right now, we're going to take questions from the proponents. Are there any questions? Senator Falscado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to the conferee virtually, I'm not sure.
Wendy Doyle.
Wendy.
Yes, yes, I am.
So from your concept of this legislation removing some of the restrictions, are you talking about, I know some years ago, the legislature dealt with a bill that, we would utilize life experiences to be able to fill some certain types of jobs. So is that kind of where part of your testimony is making that point?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Senator. Our position really is making the point that we want to keep people in the workforce, so not to create more government oversight of professions if it is not necessary and if there is not a public safety and health issue with that particular profession. And what we really want to see for Kansas is just establishing the guardrails to be able to go through a process for future professions that may need oversight, but to do it thoroughly and have a business case with some data collection to make sure that we're making the best decision for Kansas and keeping people, with the objective to keep people in the workforce is our position. So we think, if we don't need to create more government, let's not create more government. Those with lived experiences, such as the pet grooming or the spray tanning example, is just that if there's not a public safety or health issue, then why do we need to create more burdensome government oversight? So that's our position, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you. And so, Mr. Chairman, so to your staff, so do we have a list that talks about what would be deemed safety concerns? I guess that's where my concern is, are we just leaving it is in this legislation is to just what we think is safe or not, or do we have something within the law that a definition that plainly states what safety is? Thank you.
We would have to do a little looking to see if there's something that, this particular bill, I'd have to look back. I know there's a definition of welfare, and having to do with protection against fraud or physical or psychological harm. But I'm not sure this is kind of a broad-based bill or provision. It doesn't necessarily specifically anticipate what might happen in the future. It's just saying that at that time it will be reviewed.
Thank you. Okay, don't see any more questions. Yes, Senator Blue.
Thank you. Two quick questions. One, the first one is for Wendy. Wendy, I appreciate you coming with examples. Could you provide just a couple other examples for the committee of some overreach of occupational licensing?
Overreach, as an example, would be definitely in the cosmetology industry. And an example would be the requirement for shampooing as a cosmetologist that has nothing to do with, chemicals or, why should somebody that's focused on shampooing be required to have a cosmetology license? That could be a certification, or if they could be something that an 18-year-old or someone who's thinking about, going into the cosmetology industry to have that lived experience. So that's an example. I think another example would be around hair braiding, where going to cosmetology school does not teach you how to be a hair braider, and there's no chemicals involved with hair braiding. So that's another example where, overreaching, applies.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate, the examples really help out. And the second question is for the revisor is, this, what did it say, in September, they must report to JCAR the examples of why they need to keep their licensing? Is that what it is? Or what are they reporting to JCAR?
Annually, they are reporting, well, I don't want to say simply a list, but a list of the occupational licenses that they oversee, and then essentially providing information that's listed here regarding that license. It's a reporting requirement.
So, because I was saying, because JCAR doesn't have veto authority, so that's why I was trying to figure out the purpose of reporting to JCAR. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll move on to the opponents and committee. In your packet, you should have I think we have one written opposition from the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. So that should be in your folder. Our first opponent would be Scott Lloyd from CPA from Galva, Kansas, and Secretary Treasurer of the Kansas CPA Society. Scott, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Senator Alley. Thanks to all the committee members also. Yeah, I'm a CPA from Galva. Been doing this for 43 years. And you have the written testimony from us, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a personal testimony here. So the CPA profession, we feel like should be exempted exactly like the architects and the engineers. We have a very rigorous process, which I've had the opportunity nationally and internationally to be a part of through the ethics process of actually regulating CPAs. So I was on the ethics committee for 3 years right after Enron, and went on to investigate many cases with the AICPA across the United States, and also just finished up a term on the Joint Trial Board, which is the last step before they lose their license or lose their membership with the AICPA, and then it's kicked back to the Board of Accountancy in the state. So there's quite a process here to go through. If you lose your permit to practice, you lose your CPA, basically. You know, and also you could kind of look at this from the standpoint of the medical profession, because it's talked about in here. The medical profession is taking care of everybody's physical, their bodies. We're taking care of the financial responsibility across the United States. We are the trusted advisors of the public, and that is very important, and that's why we have that rigorous process in place. We feel like it brings about unnecessary bureaucratic barriers, basically layers there, and also a profound negative effect on the CPA profession in Kansas. I think it's next week that there'll be a pathways bill that will be introduced on the House side that will actually put the background of 120 hours instead of the 150 hours and 2 years of professional experience to be able to allow CPAs to become CPAs. The problem is, it's just like attorneys, it's very hard to get CPAs in the profession today. So we're trying to look at ways to help with that part of bringing more CPAs in there. So based on this information, the Kansas Society is also request the Board of Accounts to be exempt from the provisions of this bill. If exempted, we would no longer be concerned with the bill. I'd stand to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. Our next opponent will be Aaron Dunn, CPA from the Kansas Board of Accountancy and WebEx. Is that correct?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee, for allowing me to testify remotely because it is the start of our harvest season and things are starting to pick up. But I do appreciate you allowing this. Again, my name is Aaron Dunn. I think you have my written testimony. Currently the chief executive for Allen Gibson Hulick in Wichita, Kansas, and a current board member with the Board of Accountancy. Like Scott mentioned, I think we would be an advocate of a specific exemption for the CPA licensure. One of the things, or the primary purpose of the Board of Accountancy, is protection of the public interest. And so what that means is we do what you tell us, what the legislature tells us, but we got to make sure that CPAs in the state are following state statutes, regulations, as well as the professional standards, because that impacts the financial markets, it impacts banking regulations, it impacts the state statutes and federal regulations as well. So I wanted to point out that there are hundreds of federal and state statutes and regulations that mention CPAs. And so the CPA profession takes that in trust, and we do what we can to be a trusted advisor to not only our clients, but the public at large. And so one of the concerns that we would have would be how timely and how quickly can the profession in the state of Kansas adapt with the way the bill is written currently. Scott mentioned the pathways bill that's coming out. The profession's working on several other things like alternative practice structures and other things that are making the profession pivot and track quicker with what's happening out there. And so the profession needs to stay nimble and be able to make updates and changes in a fairly rapid succession on some of these issues, particularly the pathways and the APS structure, so that we as a state can be competitive with surrounding states and the nation at large. Because as you know, a lot of a lot of CPAs do cross state lines when they do business. And so we think it's important that there's an exemption for the CPAs, similar to the other learned professions that currently have an exemption in the bill. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Committee, do we have any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. That, and you remember, we do have written from the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants in your folder. With that, that basically closes our hearing today. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I should have asked this at the beginning, but as I was reviewing, I remember some ambiguity last year on where teachers and lawyers fell in this because they're not clearly exempted. Could we get some clarification on those two professions?
Be right with you shortly.
Okay, so based on the language that I'm looking at in the conference committee report, the term agency includes institutions of the state. And so I don't know if, I mean.
As the Supreme Court.
Well, and so I think there's a question there. So I think it may be a point that of possibly considering some clarity in that.
Any other questions? Yes. Senator?
So that, thank you, Mr. Chair. So that answers the question about attorneys. What about educators? I was thinking last year, we were still vague on that.
And without the explicit exclusion, I think the term agency is very broad. So I think there's a possibility that teachers could fall under that.
And that's probably an issue we need to clarify.
We will take that under consideration. Is there any other questions on this informational hearing? So we'll close the informational hearing. I do want to remind you that we do have committee hearings next week, but we'll just go through the schedule so you know what we have scheduled. It is on your, it should be online. On Monday, January 26th, we'll be in room 346, and that'll be a joint meeting with the House. Again, we're going to do that again. And this informational briefing is on college athletics. So then Tuesday, we will be meeting back here in this room, and we are going to do the commerce budget hearing. So we will review commerce budget on Tuesday of next week. Wednesday, we will have discussion and recommendations on the commerce budget. And then on Thursday, we'll have a hearing on Senate Bill 334. That's facilitating nursing workforce development. So, and then Friday, there's no meeting. That is the schedule for next week. And I do want to remind you that if you do have written if you are going to testify on the 27th on the budget hearing, we need your written comments and written testimony, and 17 copies should be given to Connie. So if you are going to testify with that. And if there's no further business, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.